It's time to cook with Susan Beck. I'm here today with another one of my family's favorite recipes. Growing up, my mom would make this coffee cake and it was just a hit every time we had it, and the whole 9x13 pan would be gone in an unbelievably fast speed. Well, I now make it for my family. Everyone enjoys it just as much. So I'm going to teach you how to make this make-ahead coffee cake. You can mix this all up and put it into your 9x13 pan with a little tin foil on the top to just cover it in the fridge and leave it in your refrigerator for up to 3 days before you bake it. And one of the reasons for doing that is then you can still serve it nice and warm, although it does heat up again in the microwave quite nicely as well. So let's look at the ingredients we have for our make-ahead coffee. Today we will begin by creaming 2/3 cup margarine. So that's about 11 tablespoons, just short of 11 tablespoons margarine. And I just want it to be softened. I got a little bit of melting going on there, which will be okay, but I do not want completely melted margarine, or butter would be fine. We cream that together with our sugars. We have a 1/2 cup of brown sugar and a cup of white sugar. We will then mix in some eggs, followed by a combination of our dry ingredients and a cup of milk. This will be topped with brown sugar, walnuts, cinnamon, and nutmeg. You could use a different kind of nut if you would like, but I'm going to use walnuts. To cream our sugars and margarine, I will just put this margarine into my mixer, and then I will add to that both the brown sugar, 1/2 cup, and the 1 cup white sugar. I will turn this on to a somewhat low speed to get it started, and then I'll turn it up a little higher so that it kind of whips together. I want to incorporate that sugar with all of my softened margarine. All right, turn it up a bit. So that is whipping nicely. I've heard different professional chefs say that you should do this for, a good minute or so to really mix it together well. I'm going to give that a little stir and then whip it just for a few more seconds here. Just making sure that none of the sugar or even the margarine is still stuck on the bottom. Our next ingredients to mix in are our eggs, and I'm going to do those one at a time. I like to break my eggs into a separate bowl, that way I can make sure I don't get any shell or anything in. That's also a really good technique when you're teaching children how to crack eggs because they get shell often. Mix that on a little higher speed, and again, use our spatula, nice rubber spatula that slides down the sides, and mix until all your eggs are incorporated. Now our next step will be to be adding our dry ingredients, which include our spices, as well as our cup of milk. And many times in cake recipes, you will read that you should alternate between dry and liquid, dry and liquid, dry and liquid. So that is what we're going to do today. That's most often done with a cake recipe, and if you look at my rhubarb cake recipe, you will see that as well as you do in this coffee cake. A reason for that, if you put all the liquid in at once, sometimes the dry ingredients don't mix well. If you have to keep it stirring a long time to get the dry ingredients in, it becomes a tough cake. So it's for a texture reason. So I am going to put my 1/2 teaspoon of salt, my 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, my 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and my teaspoon of cinnamon all into the flour here. And then I'm just going to use that teaspoon here to just kind of mix it all together. You could sift this cake. I don't sift a lot of recipes. I have some certain ones that I do feel sifting is important, buttercream frosting being one of those, but this cake turns out just fine without that. So I'm just going to put in part of my dry ingredients. I put in about 1/3 of them. So now I'm going to add about 1/3 cup of my milk. And as that starts to mix, I'll just go back and forth. Dry ingredients followed by the wet ingredients. of our ingredients are now mixed together. As I mentioned, you don't want to overbeat a cake batter. You do not want to have a tough cake. We want this to come out a little bit light and fluffy. So I am going to remove my beater and pour this into a pan that I just sprayed. This makes a 9x13 cake mix. You could easily reduce this to half a batch and cook it in an 8x8 or 9x9 pan. So in goes the batter. It's just a nice light brown batter, mostly from that cinnamon there. Okay, I've got that in. I'll just spread it around so it reaches out to all of the corners. Then next we are going to add our toppings. And I would like to mix my spices in with my brown sugar here, I think, today. So there is my half a cup of brown sugar. A little word about brown sugar. That should always be firmly packed into your measuring cup. Mine's so firmly packed it doesn't want to come out. There we go. And then in goes my quarter teaspoon nutmeg, half a teaspoon cinnamon, so some more cinnamon. And then our final ingredient will be our nuts. Now these are chopped walnuts from the store right out of the bag, but I would like them to be a little smaller so that I have little pieces on more of the cake. So I'm just going to use my handy dandy nut chopper, pound that a few times and see how those look. Ooh, popped right off there. I think it could use just a little more chopping. Okay, there we go. So on to the top of my cake. Spoon here to mix this together. I'm just going to mix that brown sugar and cinnamon. I think it just helps to get the spices everywhere if I have that well mixed. All right, and then I tend to just do this with my hands where I can kind of control better where all of it is going. And this will just make a nice, like, kind of crusty top on it that just gives it a nice finish. All right, last of that, followed by those chopped walnuts. And pecans is my other go-to nut for this recipe. So I do not plan to serve this until the weekend. So I'm going to cover it with my tin foil and put it into the refrigerator until I am ready to have it with our Sunday brunch. At that time, I'll heat my oven to 350 degrees, and once it is preheated, I will bake it for, let's see, 35 minutes. We'll talk about how you can tell a cake is done by inserting a toothpick into it. So, it'll be a few days, but we'll come back and finish this video then. Here's the coffee cake, ready to be stored in the refrigerator until I'm ready to bake it. It would be perfectly fine to put it in the oven right now. All right, our coffee cake has been in the refrigerator for 3 days, and we are now ready to bake this up for Sunday brunch. And look, it looks just as good as before. The nuts and the cinnamon and our toppings here, brown sugar, have all stayed nicely on the top. So we're going to go put this into the oven at 350 degrees. Our oven has been preheated, and we will cook it for 35 minutes. My timer just went off. My coffee cake should be finished, but the best way to test that is to take a toothpick and insert it into the middle of the cake and see how doughy it is. I find that it is still a bit on the doughy side, so I am going to put my cake back into the oven for maybe about 3 more minutes. So in goes our coffee cake, and we will check it in the same way in just a couple minutes. Let's try that toothpick trick again. All right, one more time, insert it into the center of the cake. And this time there is no batter left behind on my toothpick. So this is ready to sample. Oh, I just can't wait to dig in. The whole time it was cooking, I could just smell that cinnamon, and oh, who doesn't love cinnamon? So I'm just gonna cut a little piece out of the corner here. Just cut across the whole row there. Get about a dozen pieces out of this. A dozen nice sized pieces like that. Oh, and it's nice and hot right now. Break off a little corner there to try. I'm not sure what causes it, but you get this like caramely bottom on it with the sugars and that brown sugar and then the nuts and the cinnamon on top. This is just my favorite coffee cake. I've tried many recipes and it's really the only one I ever make. Thanks, Mom, for your make-ahead coffee cake recipe. 9 by 13 pan would be gone in an unbelievably fast speed. Well, I now make it for my family, and I've made it for relatives on my husband's side of the family, and everyone enjoys. So to cream our margarine, we are going to put that into our electric mixer. Oh my egg is rolling around.